All right, so it has been a few months now since I've actually recorded and shared a podcast. And if you are a subscriber and you've watched the episodes I've released before now, firstly, I apologize for the time that's gone by since I've last posted an episode. There was a lot for me to navigate in life in general, in wonderful ways, and I had to prioritize a couple of things. And it was never my intention to stop the podcast, just to really hit pause. And in that time, there's been so much that I've been working on and different projects that I've been involved in. And I'm really delighted to be releasing this episode with my dear brother, Dr. Tom Ronen Goddard, who's been on the podcast a couple of times. And we've actually teamed together to create an offering to the world, which is a men's group called SummitOne. And this is really about a brotherhood. And in this episode, we get into what are some of the issues that men are facing and what is it that we are offering in response to some of these challenges. This is going to be one of many conversations to come. We're just dipping our toes in the water in this episode, and we've already teed up what the next one is going to be as we really kind of navigate and weave through the dynamics and the experiences that men are facing at the moment. So, before we do get started, if you are interested in becoming a member of the Brotherhood, there is a link below to the website where we get into exactly what is included from weekly calls to our own platform and app for community, as well as if you are in the UK and certain parts of the States, the physical locations for our in-person summits that we're just really delighted and excited to be launching. We really want this to be a rich, deep community of people that are seeking a path of purpose, meaning, value, deep connection, intimacy, growth, self-exploration, reflection, and all of that good stuff. So, if that does call to you, check out the link below. And I'm delighted to introduce this episode with my dear brother and co-founder of the SummitOne Brotherhood, Dr. Tom Ronen Goddard.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's lovely. Lovely to
I love that.
be exploring these realms with you, and particularly today, exploring today and in many of our conversations, both recent and anticipated in the future, what it is to be a man in the 21st century. What are the challenges? Why do men need each other? What do we even mean by a man? What do we mean by masculinity? I mean, I think it's a revolutionary time for men. And what I hear in men is a good bit of anxiety and, frankly, depression and need. There's a growing new kind of need, it seems to me, or maybe I'm just noticing it new in my conversations with men. How about you? What are you noticing when you talk with men about the challenges that we're facing as men?
Oh, I feel like where to start. I feel like it's in every direction. I feel like there are so many reasons that contribute to it socially, structurally, economically, the impacts that has on relationships, technology, social media. I think all of these things seem to be creating this almost like a exponential curve in the feeling of crisis, of difficulty, of making sense and feeling like there's a reason to actually be here.
Mm.
And one of the things that you mentioned was, men needing men, but I think men need to be needed.
Ah, beautiful.
I
Yeah,
think that's one of the big things is men need to be needed, not just wanted.
right.
I think we need to be needed, whether that's in our family, in our social circle, in our community, in our workplace. But when we feel like we're actually needed, we have a reason to exist. We have a reason to live. We have purpose. We have meaning. We have value. And I think men really not just want that, I think they need it. And I think in a time where now being born a man is in somewhat a sin, in some
Mm.
teachings, it's a privilege, and ironically, it becomes the actually the opposite. It's not a privilege. It's a privilege and a sin. The two, the two are synonymous. Um, when it's almost a sin to be a man, and you feel like you're not just not needed, but you're actually a contribution to
Mm.
millennia of problematization. I think it creates a pretty difficult time and experience to navigate.
Right. And I think it's not that we can't say that this sin, or the notion that it is a sin to be man, hasn't been earned by men at a certain level. The sins of the fathers have been visited on the sons, though. And
Yes.
so, we can look historically at some of the darkest times or the darkest moments in human history and say, well, men did that.
Yes.
And so we live in a time, it seems, when there's accountability now. You have done this to us. The problem with that is, though, it is a confusion of responsibility. That while it's certainly true that men have created some terrible situations in human history, in fact, most of the terrible situations in human history, um, it there's a kind of an injustice in presuming that therefore men are, by virtue of being men, sinful, and, as you to pick up on your thread, not needed. We don't need men. The universe doesn't need men. We'd be better off without men, goes the narrative that I've heard in some quarters. And to be a man, uh, hearing that, while at the same time knowing that some of the great achievements of humanity have also been from men, it's a very confusing time and a distressing time, frankly, to walk into a room and be feared and even loathed and experienced as not welcome
Mm.
simply by virtue of being a man.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, like you said, there's a reason for it, and it's very easy to take the position of it's not fair that I might be demonized for something I haven't done. However, I think just like with doing trauma work for maybe what we experienced in our childhood, we have to take responsibility for what we were not responsible for.
Right, right, right.
I might not be responsible for what generations of men before me did. However, if we want to create change, then there has to be a level of responsibility that we're willing to take, and actually to say, yes, there needs to be change. And the
Hmm.
change isn't men aren't needed, it's the world need great men.
Right.
Society need great men in their greatness that are great fathers, that are great husbands or partners, are great sons, are great brothers, are great colleagues, are great business people, are great contributors to society.
I love what you said there about responsibility. And I think one of the great sources of confusion is that linguistically in English, we sometimes mix up um, guilt with responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always liked the reframing of the word responsibility to mean able to respond.
Mm-hmm.
Even if I just landed from another planet and had absolutely nothing to do with the evils visited upon humanity by men throughout time, um, I would still have an ability to respond. So it is still possible to be responsible for that lineage of harm.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so that's what I think that speaks to your point. What is it? How would a great man or how would great men respond to the times which have been created by men and women? What are we being called to do? How are we able to respond to the great crises of our time, the great needs of our time?
Mm.
And for that, we are needed, and our greatness is needed.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking about this yesterday, and it was, to live in our greatness it is our moral duty, really.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's the only way we actually make change across generationally, and then for the generations to come, in the way in which we can contribute as much as possible. But we do need to be in our greatness. And you know I was listening to the one mountain that you did maybe a year ago, and one of the things that was read in there is it's not enough to confess our sins, we have to confess our greatness.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about that, and it's so true. It's not until we're able to confess our greatness that we're able to see it, and it's only when we see our greatness that we're able to aim for it. And we have to aim at our greatness if we have any chance of achieving it.
Right. And I think
So
this is where the community of men we can really support each other. We can reflect back to each other our greatness. I can say, Sabri, let me tell you about the ways I think you're amazing, and reflect that back to you. And we also can inspire each other
yeah,
to our own greatness.
yeah,
And years ago, I was going through a moment of crisis, a period of crisis in my life. One incredibly important relationship was in its death throes, or at least in its transformational throes. It felt like death, but as it turns out, it was just a big transformation. And my counselor at the time, a minister who now lives in Canada, said to me, you, at a time like this, you need to, whatever you're doing with men, you need to do more. You're in a men's group, go to it more frequently. You've been to a couple of men's gatherings, go to more of them.
mm-hmm.
Swim in the stew of other men, and you'll be amazed. And he didn't explain what would happen. I'm pretty sure he didn't know what would happen, but he trusted that if I trusted myself and my time to the community of men, that something would come out of it for me that would help me navigate through that revolutionary period in my life. And because I trusted this teacher, I did. I don't think I missed a men's group meeting unless I was out of town for the rest of my time living in that area. And I don't think I missed a men's retreat. In fact, I started leading men's retreat in part in response to that invitation to immerse myself in the community of men, not to the exclusion of women, but
Sure.
very often I had found, as a married man, I had found my connection to men um, occasional and not immersive. And so I doubled down and really got into relationship with men for that purpose. So I could find some dimension of what was great about me that
Yeah,
could be celebrated.
yeah, yeah. I really think uh, being a part of a community of men, that, and not necessarily just any men, but where there is a narrative and a calling to aim up and forwards, to aim towards the summum bonum, the ultimate and highest good. and we're looking for that in each other.
Mm-hmm.
And because sometimes it can be really difficult to witness your own greatness. Sometimes, in fact, it can be the hardest thing is to
Oh,
witness
absolutely.
your own greatness. So to have other men that can see your greatness, that can point out your greatness, and that can call you into your greatness, I think is hugely valuable. And actually, I think that is the way in which we become needed, is to recognize our greatness, is to recognize the gift in that is uniquely ours, and
Mm-hmm.
to give that gift and to know that no one else can give it, as you know, as unique self theory would lean to. I think that
Absolutely.
that is it. I think we have to find our greatness and we have to live it, and then we become needed, and we realize that we're not replaceable. And I think the power of being in community of men that can see that, and we all fall out of our greatness, don't we? It's
Oh, yeah. A few times a day.
yeah, right, yeah. So I think to have men that are coming from a place of full-hearted love, and that's why it's not just friendship; it's brotherhood.
Mm-hmm.
It goes beyond that. That can lovingly call each other into our greatness when we forget it as well.
Yeah.
Just that alone is immensely powerful, I believe.
Yeah. And I think you hit on an incredibly important word, and that is uniqueness. In some of the work I've done with both of our friend and teacher, Mark Goffney, um, we went through a period of about 9 months in which he helped me clarify my own unique greatness through an extensive process that he calls facets, where each month in our monthly call, we would explore a dimension of who I was uniquely throughout my whole life, not just at this phase of my life. And he set up this whole process this way. He said, and this echoes what you said a moment ago, we have an incredibly difficult time sensing our own fragrance or feeling our own texture, our unique fragrance, our unique
Mm.
texture. And he referenced a friend of ours as by way of example that we both knew this woman. He said, with this person, if we were to describe her, since we both know her well, we would be able to describe her fragrance or her texture, um, her unique fragrance, her unique texture, pretty accurately and in pretty much the same way, because it is who she is in important ways, or at least it's how she has been in important ways. He said, but we have an incredibly difficult time in sensing that in ourselves.
Yeah.
And so when we get together, we can actually explore, who am I, not just as a man, but as this unique man. And the eyes of our brothers can help us to see that.
Mm.
And so if we can learn about our uniqueness, then we can learn about our unique greatness, our unique obligation in the world. You referenced this, what is mine to do, no more, no less? What is mine to do
Mm.
uniquely? And why am I uniquely equipped for this like nobody else? We can help each other that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when one of the things that I believe men will discover as they enter into the community, the space, the container that we are creating is that to begin with, they may be thinking, um, how can I benefit from this? Like, what's the value? What can I get? Which kind of is natural. But I think as people weave in more deeply, I think one of the things they'll get the most from it is the gift of giving their uniqueness to the other brothers, where they actually do become needed, where they can be in there and they can see other people, where they can reflect and it's valued and they become valued. And actually, one of the greatest things to receive, I believe, will possibly be the the giving of oneself and being received.
Right. In that we can learn, in that giving, we can learn that we are uniquely essential.
Yeah.
And that when I don't step into the space that I'm invited to step into, something is lost.
Yeah.
That I'm actually missed by that space that calls to me to step in, by that need of the universe that calls me into my greatness. If I don't step into that or into that community, then my unique gift is missed.
Mm.
And of course, we can't even know that. We can't know how much we're missed because we're not there to know how much we're missed.
Yeah.
So, but if we are there, then we can start to get a sense of, oh, I actually matter in this community. And if I matter in this community, maybe I actually matter in the world. I'm needed in this community. Maybe I'm needed in the world.
And I think that, tying back to where we started, I think that is really the thing that I think that is the thing that is needed for men, is to be needed, to know that they actually matter in the world. Because what does that do to your existence from when you wake up in the morning knowing I matter in the world, I am needed? How do you get out of bed? How do you get ready for your day? How do you leave the house? It's How can it not be one of the most impactful things to know deeply?
Right. Right. As opposed to some generalized sense that, oh, in the United States, we have a commercial a few years ago where this poor, I think it was a Dunkin' Donuts commercial, where this poor man who ran the donut shop was getting up at 3:30 in the morning, and he mutters half asleep as he's trying to get awake, time to make the donuts, time to make the donuts. And so some sort of categorical sense of obligation. And you get a sense from his low energy that he was not lifted out of bed by a sense of deep calling to his uniqueness. Instead, it was more of a categorical, "You're the donut man. It's time to make the donuts." And I think this goes back to the uniqueness. If I have a sense of myself as a man, as society has defined it for me, or as my family has defined it for me, then that sense of that sense of obligation comes from the outside, and it's categorical. All men should do X. All men should be X, and there's no inner inspiration in that, in meeting these external demands of culture, of family, of that I've adopted to myself. But if I have a sense of my unique gift, my unique greatness, and the obligation that is uniquely mine, the need that I'm meeting that is uniquely mine to meet, then we can get true enthusiasm in the original sense of that word, enthusiasm filled with the spirit, or with
Mm.
God, theism, to be filled with the spirit, whether you're a theist or not, to be filled with that life force.
Mm.
And for the theists in the room, to be filled with the Spirit of God. And then for that, if that animates your getting out of bed, it's no longer it's time to make the donuts, but it's like, it's time to fulfill my greatness today. How can I
Yeah.
do that? What am I being called by my own unique obligation
Mm.
to do with joy and excitement?
Yeah. 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 And I think it seems that we've been through a transition, really, where for the longest time men were needed because of their role,
Mm-hmm.
because of what they could do. And now, we could say over the last 60, 70 years, that's been less and less of the case. So if for the longest time men have been used to, and even we still learn culturally in some ways that the way in which we are needed through what we do, however, now what we do is not needed, then where do we find our sense of being needed? And I think this is the time to pivot into going inwards to discover the being that I am and the way in which that is expressed and shared with the world is the thing that is needed, because it may be that your gift is not commodifiable, but that doesn't mean you aren't needed.
Right. Oh boy, that's a big sentence there, Sabri. I love that. The fact that and let me see if I can capture it, the sense of it. If we learn that our gift is not quantifiable, are we still needed? And the answer, of course, is yes. But do we know what that is? Does each of us know what that is? And that cannot be answered by roles. It seems like men throughout history have been, in a sense, both imprisoned and by role. If you were a farmer, you were a farmer, and there was no question. If your father was a farmer, you were going to be a farmer, and your son was going to be a farmer, and that was passed on through generations. If you were a hunter, if your father was a hunter, your son will be a hunter, etc. And we and that both granted us a sense of security. There was no existential questioning. What am I supposed to be doing? And on the other hand, it utterly imprisoned us in this non-unique expression. It didn't matter if you had gifts to be a farmer or not. You were going to be a farmer. It didn't matter whether your unique gifts were that of a hunter. You better be a hunter or you'll die and your family will die. But now in the 21st century, we have so much more possibility. We've been freed from the shackles, some of us, of role-based self-definition. And now what? In the freeing, we're a little bit like Morgan Freeman's character in the Shawshank Redemption. When he's freed from prison, he has no idea what to do. In prison, he knew exactly what his role was and who he was, with reference to the guards and to his fellow inmates. And then he's released, and he's completely baffled. I think he's a good model for what modern man is going through, and he fell completely apart. He fell completely apart, and almost hung himself. That was the level of depression, and I think that's very close to what modern man is experiencing. Many modern men are experiencing now. We are freed up to do what many of us are freed up to do what we want, and we don't know what to do with that new freedom.
I've been thinking about this recently, that there's an idea, and I think especially within, maybe even more so within postmodernity, of like freedom, and the freedom of oneself is the pinnacle, is the summit, the freedom in every possible way. But I don't necessarily think that is freeing when there's a thousand potential options. It's like, well, which one do I choose? It's kind of like going on Netflix, and you have no idea what you want to watch, and you sat there with your partner, and whenever we want to watch a film, and then 45 minutes later of scrolling through, you say, right, I've had enough.
Right.
I'm done. And you get nowhere because there's too many options. If there's just five, it would be a lot easier.
A lot easier. And frankly, recent research by psychologists and others have revealed that too much choice is a source of anxiety, whether we have too much choice in terms of coffee. There's a great scene in, I think it was Robin Williams' first or second dramatic role, Moscow on the Hudson. He's been living in the confines of Soviet consumer culture, such as it was, where you hear that paper, they now have toilet paper down at the local store. And in the middle of a winter night, you stand in line for an hour and a half just to get your toilet paper, and there's one brand. He comes to America and he finds, well, and don't get us started on coffee, right? No choices about coffee, and very often no coffee. He comes to America, and his first foray into the coffee aisle of an American grocery store, he starts looking around and says, coffee, 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 coffee. And he hyperventilates from the anxiety of so many choices and faints on the floor of a grocery store when presented with so many options. It is not necessarily good for us to walk unprepared into a world of too many choices.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I see this kind of work that we're contemplating and that we're doing, stepping in. If I can clarify my unique self in the company and with the reflection of my brothers, then I can more reasonably, more sacredly discover, what am I supposed to be doing with this one precious life that I've been given?
Yeah, yeah. To discover that, which I think so many never do. And again, maybe because in previous generations it wasn't really a thing something would consider, because there weren't really the choices. You're the farmer, you're the son of a farmer, you're the fifth generation of farmers, and I'm a farmer. That's that. But the times have changed so rapidly, and hey, maybe some of the men that find this most difficult are the men that are kind of at a time between worlds, which feels like a quote of Marx, but a time between worlds where they were born, when they were born and growing up as a young man, it was more about a role, and then within one's lifetime, that has changed, and that no longer is the case. And it's almost, well, I had these foundational beliefs that I grew up with, that I entered into the workplace with, that I thought this would be my value, and now all of culture and society has largely shifted, and it's, well, now where do I find and place my value? And I think this loops back to, it's that, it seems like the transcendence from value being on doing to value on being.
Mm-hmm. And I think you've pointed to another aspect of what it is to be a man in the 20th century, and that is the unfolding over time and unfolding over the lifespan of a changing external environment and a changing internal environment. I think this is where a lot of the benefit from you and I being separated by, as you said in the first podcast of yours that I did with you, you said by a couple of years, but the truth is, for our viewers, it's a couple of decades and change. As I just entered my 70th year this last week, and in my youth, you picked a profession and you trusted that that would be your profession for 30 or 40 years. And that was true for many of us. And I thought it would be true for me. I said, I'm going to be a lawyer. And so then I did that for a while. And thank God I encountered this kind of the early seeds of the kind of work that you and I have done for much of our lives since then. And that is a kind of work that doesn't assume that to be true. And so I was able to say to myself something that would have been inconceivable even a few years before, and is still inconceivable to many. What if I'm not a lawyer into my old age? What might I be otherwise? And then start to explore, what am I actually better suited for? What actually gives me pleasure? Well, then in my case, it was, I think I'll become a psychologist. Well, what kind of psychologist? And then it got more specific. And fortunately, I had good teachers along the way that helped guide me to a world that I did not even know existed when I was talking to my guidance counselor in high school. And I think this is not simply a matter of having been in the adult world for over half a century. It's actually happening really quickly, even for men your age and younger, because the outside world is changing so blindingly rapidly. Careers that did not even exist 5 years ago are now growing like gangbusters. A prompt engineer, prompt
Yeah.
engineer, I don't think there was even a term in common usage 2 years ago. And with the rise of artificial intelligence for the masses, now there's prompt engineer as a career path. And that
Yeah.
may not last 5 years. It may be replaced by something else. So we are being called as men into a kind of a flexibility that our forefathers never knew.
Yeah. So I feel like what we just went through was a really good place to kind of. I feel like we got to a good place there of what are some of the difficulties on a. I would say at the deepest foundational level, and why a men's group and with what we're creating is somewhat an antidote to that. I think what would be nice to look at is our uniqueness. What will make SummitOne unique? What do we bring that is different? Now, of course, I mean, you asked me that before, and I said, "Well, I'm here, you're here," you know. but what does that mean?
Yeah. What does it mean to you, Sabri?
Yeah. For me personally, in my life so far, I've had an experience that's really quite far across the spectrum. And I always reference this behind me. I feel like I've been on one side of the bipolar shadow. I think I've been on the other side. And now I find myself trying to aim towards, up and forwards into the fullness. I feel like I've encountered and lived and experienced a lot of the feelings that disenfranchised men feel, that might feel hopeless and depressed and like they have no value and they are undesirable. And then my response to that was, let me, like a demon, be possessed and obsessed to go to the other end of the spectrum of that. And within about a 5 or 6 year period, I guess I did, physically, financially, behaviorally, romantically in my dating life, kind of in all of the areas, really. And so I've went right across the other way, which there's some value in the ability to take action, to say, I am not happy with this, I'm going to do something about it, to actually acquiring a skill set of learning how to create change. But then to get to that other side and discover, oh, well, this isn't it either. And to then go through the feelings of, I now feel a different set of negative emotions, and I feel a different set of feelings that were still undesirable. And actually, I feel truly blessed that I got to experience both, because I think it gives me somewhat of a unique lived experience of being both of those things, of literally not having, like, feeling terrified at the idea of saying hi to a woman, to, you know, living the extreme ends of promiscuity and hedonism, to realize, well, that's not it. And sometimes, men that feel disenfranchised think that's the goal, and it's, and I speak to men now that I think that's the goal, and it's like, trust me, it's not the goal. And I know you think it is, and I know when I say it's not, you're still thinking, yes, it is.
Yeah.
And so I feel very blessed to have experienced both ends, and interestingly, to experience the judgment and the rejection at both ends as well. I experienced plenty of name calling and bullying, I guess we could say, when I was younger, for being a fat kid. And then to being at the other ends, where I would feel some sense of rejection for having a muscular physique and being close to how I appear now, when I would, and I so often experience it when I go to, for example, last year when I went to Belgium at the mystery school with Mark, I can sense it when I first get there. There are people that are judging me, and it's something like, well, he can't be spiritual.
Right. He spent way too much time in the gym. He cannot be spiritual.
And I feel that. I feel it. And in almost every event I go to in that way, I will at some point have someone come over to me and apologize. It happened at mystery school several times, either halfway through or towards the end, where someone, and they didn't need to, but they obviously felt it. They came and they said, "Hey, I want to say sorry. I judged you when I first saw you here. I thought you were going to be a certain way, and I was so wrong." In fact, one person said, he said, "I've connected with you more than anyone else." So it's just interesting to have the experience of both ends. When you're being picked on at school for looking a certain way, you think, okay, let me respond to that. And then there's still some level of judgment and rejection. So anyway, I think there's a broad range of experience, which I think is valuable to actually enact change, but to enact change from a place of clarity. To then understand that it's not across here, it's this, it's what is the fullness, what is the clarification, and to move towards that and to help people do the same. And I think the lived experience that I've had is valuable, coupled with part of my lived experience is from a young age. I was talking to my mum about it, and I was saying I can remember being, from 12, 13, being aware that I could see things made to other people. And she said, "Oh, it was way before that. When you were really young, you were thinking differently, 4 or 5." And I thought, that's interesting, because I didn't remember that. And I've always viewed things in a deeper way. I've always looked for the depth, and I've always been called to teach. I started assisting in martial art classes, teaching martial art classes when I was 14. I really felt the calling to teach from a young age. I felt alive when I was helping other people and helping other people learn something. And that never stopped. I've never stopped teaching since then. At 16, I was teaching 23 martial art classes a week.
My goodness.
And I was teaching kids all the way to adults. I was at that age. I was very good, and I always had this ability to look really deeply into a technique and break it down to the smallest details. And I think that just shows up in how I am now with the way in which we show up to the world, and behaviors and patterns. And so I think that's some of my value. And then, and to invoke our conversation in Vermont when we met, is I want to look for the magnificence in others, and I love other people. And the place I come from is from a place of love, and that's really what I desire to create within our community, is that full-hearted love. Um, and then I think we take that, and then everything I've experienced from you, Tom, and the generational difference, I think, is incredible, because there's different perspectives. My life journey, in so many ways, is very different to yours, and our ages are different, and with all the differences, yet we land in a place where there's a deep connection, because there are then so many similarities. But I think with all of your wisdom and experience and perspective and lived experience, and the combination of those, and I think that naturally will attract some likeness, which means I'm likely to attract men of a more similar age to myself, and I'm sure there are men in a more similar range to you that are drawn to you, and of course younger, and you know, it'll be the same for both. But I think what's beautiful about that is it will create a multi-generational community, and that to me is actually something really beautiful, that someone could join at 20 and they can have men that see them and support them that might be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years older, and to be a part of a community like that, I think is very unique and special.
Yeah. Your answer to the question, what does Sabri bring, is in some ways a version of mine. I would say the commonality. Well, there are many commonalities. In fact, maybe there may be complete commonalities here. We have both, from an early age, been drawn by love and drawn to love. I would say that has been an organizing principle for me since my earliest memories. Love, both at the micro level within my family of origin, but as I explored community and as I explored spirit, it was all about love. It was all about love. That being said, I am reminded of the fable of the young man who goes to the old wise man and says, "I keep on screwing up. How do I avoid making mistakes?" And the old man says, "Wisdom." And the young man says, "Well, how do I get wisdom? Making mistakes." and and while I these days don't necessarily characterize some of the paths I've taken necessarily with the word mistake, they were certainly interesting paths that the and I think I know I brought consciousness all along the way, most often in retrospect, to I find myself in a metaphorical dark alley, and then I would bring consciousness to that, and I would say, how did I end up here? And then I would see where I had gone off the path of love, self-love, or love of other, and brought consciousness to that. So hopefully I wouldn't make that mistake again. I think what that's empowered me to do in my work with people generally and with men in particular is I have made most of the what are often characterized as screwed up decisions that most of the men I've ever known have made up. I have known the path of substance abuse. I have known the path of infidelity. I have known the path you referenced, where I thought I would get satisfaction through promiscuity. Right? I've explored lots and lots and lots of paths, and I've been graced with a level of consciousness. Again, usually in retrospect, where I go, "Oh my, that was a lot of suffering there for me and others. How can I not create that for me and others again?" So that when I'm working with a man who is lost on one of these painful paths that they're probably characterizing as detours, and I'm just saying, "Oh, this is part of your path," I can walk with them. I'm not even sure that I want to characterize myself as a teacher, although many have. It's really more a companion. I can walk with you on this path because I know this path. I know what allured me to it. I know the suffering that I created for myself and others on this path. I know how sticky this path can be, how hard to escape from it can be. So let me walk with you a ways. And we'll see what we find together. And so it is, I mean, I suppose there's a bit of wisdom, but the wisdom is really more for myself. I mean, I'm wise enough not to go down some of these paths again, but I'm also humble enough, I would say, to not presume that I could teach you, but I can walk with you. I can definitely walk with you down this path, no matter how dark it may be. And I might even have a flashlight to help us avoid snake pits together.
Yeah, something you said then that I really felt is, it's not just the pain that we can cause ourselves in making either some of the mistakes or certain choices, but it's the pain it can cause others as well. And, as you said that, it just, it highlighted to me like, yeah, and to avoid, because I think once you become aware of some of the choices you've been making and the pain that has caused for other people, sometimes that bit of awareness is enough to create a lot of guilt. And, a lot of awareness can allow for, I think, the transcendence of guilt, because it can create a larger view, a deeper understanding. And then we realize that feeling guilt really is a rejection of God's forgiveness. And, if anything, probably holds us in a lower level of consciousness, which it doesn't allow us to be of service and actually create any type of change that we'd want to. But a little bit of awareness, I think, can create a lot of guilt. So I think the value of having someone that can maybe offer guidance to prevent certain choices that might cause pain, or to navigate through, because I believe the types of people that will be drawn to what we are creating, and there's a type of person that's going to resonate with that, and it is someone that is likely more aware and seeking more awareness, and maybe at a level of awareness where they are feeling a deep amount of shame and guilt for some of their previous choices and decisions and actions and behaviors. So to know how to navigate that, and I can say I've certainly gone through that, and still now, there are times where I'll think about things that I've done in the past, and even not that far in the past, where it's heartbreaking, in the moments, and then it's like, okay, let me navigate this feeling and relation I have with. And sometimes I find it hard to say what I did. If I think of the I, the capital I, I'm like, however, it's like this configuration of Sabri, and maybe it was the pain body, or maybe we can name it something that arose at certain times, which when I'm speaking now certainly doesn't feel like me.
Right.
I'm like, oh God, what was that?
Right. Yeah.
And navigating that.
Yeah. What I trust and what's helped me along the way, Sabri, is that I trust that every step I have taken has been motivated by my deepest yearning, which is my deepest yearning to love and be loved. And I trust that of all people. I believe all of our actions at the deepest level come from that yearning to love and be loved, no matter how shitty it looks to the outside world. It comes from that. And so I trust that about you, and I trust that about everybody who will work with us and join our community, and everybody that I encounter. No matter what I might think of their actions, I trust that their actions were taken out of that deep yearning. Rupert Spira um, and Mark Goffney are both of the view that there's actually not any such thing as a detour. They're all of these steps that we are taking are headed in the right direction because they're all headed toward love. Now, they may be from an obscured sense of what that means or how that would translate into my behavior. At a certain point in my life, it translated into infidelity. At another point in my life, actually an overlapping point in my life, it translated to alcohol abuse. But even those were, as I look back on them, motivated by a yearning for connection, a yearning for connection with love, and a yearning to have the experience of both giving and receiving love. Now, in retrospect, I know that that didn't get me what I wanted. And so I've made some different choices in this part of my life than I made 20, 30 years ago. But it's all motivated in the same direction. It's all ultimately trying to get us all back to a realization of who we are. And that is a unique manifestation of the sacred all that is, whatever that, however you characterize that. And in that sense, I've come, at least for myself and as I view others, to move away from guilt and condemnation and blame. If I just keep that in mind, that every one of my so-called mistakes was motivated by that, and everything that I might or the world might characterize as sin is just a misstep on the desired path toward love and toward the realization of who I actually am. And I think that's something that you and I share. I think we have brought, at our different points in our lives that we are, brought a level of understanding of ourselves and of humanity generally that we are best guided by love, and we almost can't help but be guided by love, even when we go down a dark alley.
Yeah. What you said there was, actually, it brought tears to my eyes because I can feel how powerful it will be for any man that's listening to this to enter into a community where what you said, that you trust that everything I do was either seeking of or for love, and trusting that everyone in the community is doing things for the same reason. To be in a space where that is the way in which they are viewed, where they can bring all of what they are all of what they have done, all of their mistakes, whether that's the right word or not, but for them to bring that and to be viewed in that way, that alone is so powerful and healing, and I think offers for a space to actually be able to see their greatness, because so often if we're carrying guilt, we can be completely blinded by it, where it doesn't matter how hard we look, we actually can't see our greatness because we're so blinded by the guilt for what we've done before now in an unclarified way, even if it was, kind of the wrong. We can do the wrong thing with the right intention.
Oh, and I've done decades of that. Take the right thing
Yeah,
with the wrong intention and the wrong thing with the right intention. Absolutely both sides of that.
yeah,
Absolutely. It's what it is
yeah,
to be a human. I think you
yeah.
really point out, I think what we're both pointing to is a really nurturing community is one in which we can show up even with our self-loathing at whatever level we're carrying that self-loathing
Mm,
and be
mhm,
seen as flawless and
mhm.
be seen as uh, even divine manifestations that have simply forgotten that we are divine manifestations.
And I think this is where it feels like this is like a portal that allows us to access, we said, our greatness, but also our
Mhm.
power. Our power as men is when we can let go of that which we are carrying. Because sometimes when we're carrying all of that, it can be crippling, where we can't access our power, our greatness. We can't. Not only can we not access it, we can't even
Right,
see it. So when we can put that down, we spoke about masculinity. It's like it's the that nurture, that love, that ability to see and hold close, which is the nature of, we could say the feminine, but we could say circular
right,
energy. It's that brings the masculine or the line energy that's been in its shadow out of,
right.
and offers that balance to now enter into the fullness of the masculine expression. um
Mm.
I think that is the knock-on effect of
Mm.
it.
Oh, I think you've just inspired me about at least one topic for our next conversation of these sorts. I really want to, and not today, but I really want to spend some time with you exploring what is an evolved notion of masculinity. What do we even mean by masculinity for the modern man, for the new man? I think that's a rich area. We've heard so much about toxic masculinity. Well, what's the counter to that? And I think one of the things that well, I know it's one of the things that I'm intending for this community is that we have open-hearted conversations with ourselves and others about what is masculinity and what might it be? What can it be? What can we aspire to in terms of masculinity? So I definitely want to open that up with you in a future conversation. Sabri, it's always a delight to have these conversations with you, and may they offer some window into possibility for whoever's watching. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this and if you resonate with Tom and I and what we are creating with the SummitOne Brotherhoods, then please check out the link below, see if it is for you. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and to ask. We are in the early stages of creation with this, laying the foundations and taking in the first members, the first brothers right now. And we're really excited for the future, the plans, the vision that we have for how this can grow, how this can expand, and how we really want it to become a global brotherhood, already with meetings here in the UK and with the sites of multiple locations across the USA. So if you feel called, if you resonate, if you want to be a part of this, then check out the link. Feel free to reach out, and we'll be delighted to to be of service, to connect, to get to know you, and to walk this path together. All right. Thanks once again, and I will see you on the next one.